Welcome to Blackhawks Insider, the official podcast of the Chicago Blackhawks, presented by ChevyDriveChicago.com. Drive what Captain Jonathan Toews drives. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use, and like our YouTube page, as well as all the videos that are posted on the Blackhawks YouTube page as well. Colby Cohen, Kaylee Chelios joined for this week's edition, and why don't we just get right into it, Colby? For the first time since January 28th, the captain, Jonathan Toews, made his return to the lineup on Saturday night. Pretty incredible to see him get back after what's been a pretty, I would say challenging, but that doesn't really sell what he's been going through lately. But I think for the fans, for the team, for coaches, for everybody, all Blackhawks fans, it was pretty exciting to be able to see him and how loud the United Center was that night when he made his return to the lineup for the first time. Colby, what'd you think?
Well, the Jonathan Toews thing is important, but I have to at least quickly give you a little bit of credit because I think Chris might have just gotten fired from introing this podcast, because that was the best intro. That was the best intro we've had this entire season. So Chris might be on the hot seat. He might be on the hot seat from the intro to the podcast, because that was a very, very pleasant intro. So well done for that one, Kaylee. And on the Jonathan Toews topic, you know, I think those moments send shockwaves through the NHL. I really do. And the amount of people that reached out to me just from out of this market, excited that Toews was back in the lineup. The game was on national TV, which I think was a cool added bonus. So fans all over the U.S., Canada could see the game. And for me personally, getting to see him take the ice, this is a guy that, I've seen from afar his whole career. I've always respected him a lot, and then getting to know him over the last couple of years being here, just makes you like him and respect him even more, seeing the challenges that he's gone through with his, personal health situation and, the things that he's dealt with. And, you and I had been talking about this leading up to it in the studio about, what we thought. Did we think we would see him again, and how great we thought it would be to see him again? And I'll be honest, I really didn't know, based on he wasn't really on the ice. He wasn't really working out a whole lot. He was trying to kind of get himself back, feeling good. And it was great. I think starting lineup, when they called his name, the building was as loud as it's been all year. And then to see him get an assist and set up that Athanasiou goal, he puts the one arm up, the celebration, and then Athanasiou comes running over to him. Those are incredible moments, Kaylee. You've lived them at this arena with this organization for a lot longer than I have, with the history that you have here. But it was one of those moments that at least I felt, was a chilling moment.
I agree with you. I liked Athanasiou's response. It was a really emotional reaction, looked right at him, and Toews probably could have had a couple more points, maybe a goal or two earlier in that game.
2-on-1, right?
2-on-1. I thought it was great. Obviously, it's going to take him some time to get him some timing back, but I know that's not really it's not really what he's focused on necessarily. It was incredible just to see him do it. I think more so for the fans and for his teammates than anybody, because he's still not 100% healthy. And the biggest question, like you said, has been, what is he going through on a day-to-day basis? What has it been like to be him? And he's been pretty private for the most part during this time to be able to recover. And then I thought he was super genuine and generous with his time, talking to the media about a little bit about what it's been like behind the scenes. So to see the reaction from his teammates, from the fans, I think it showed just how much he means to this organization and what a big moment that was for him to be able to put the Blackhawks sweater on for potentially the last time. And I remember thinking right when AA scored that goal, like that very well could have been his last point potentially. That's what that kind of feeling and emotion was like watching that game, which was sad. But I don't want to say too much about that, considering he hasn't said he's going to retire or what his next move has been, other than taking care of himself, which he deserves. So great to see him back.
Yeah, and you kind of think about all the great moments, and I think, again, like, unbelievable for the fans in the United Center and here in Chicago. But I do believe that he's the type of player that has the magnitude that the whole hockey world is watching. It's the whole, community. And I think everybody has sort of seen what he's gone through from a distance. And the thing that I didn't ever know about Johnny that I learned coming here and getting to know him was just kind of how intelligent he is off the ice and the amount of time he spends sort of learning about different things and learning about, different communities and different health practices and nutrition practices and just all the different maybe trainings that he's done, physical training that he's done and different methods. And he really is like one of the most intelligent hockey players that I've probably ever met. He spends hours and hours reading books constantly on different things, ranging from leadership to, health and wellness. So I hope, just as somebody who likes to watch hockey games, I hope Johnny is able to continue to play, because I will say this, he didn't feel good this season, but he still is a good hockey player. Like, even at, let's give him a 70% or 50%. I mean, he was on pace this year for 25 to 30 goals. And he, by his own standard, Kaylee, wasn't even playing well. And so he comes back after not playing for 2 months. He wins 8 out of 12 faceoffs. He's still got so much game, and I know there's more to it. And I hope whatever decision he makes is what's best for him, and that's it. But as a hockey fan, I selfishly hope we get to continue to watch him play wherever that may be, here or elsewhere, because you like watching him as a fan.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's been an emotional journey with Kane leaving and uncertainty with Jonathan Toews, but like you said, I think the last 2 years battling his health has given him a lot of perspective, and he's been able to find, help and interests in other ways that are helping him get through this. So we hope the best for Toews. Great to see him in the lineup. Really respect what the coaching staff and Kyle Davidson have done with him and allowing him to take his time and just being supportive and giving him whatever he needs until he feels like he can play to the best of his abilities and enjoy coming to the rink every single day. So with that, kind of want to look more into Kyle Davidson. He's been so busy having a baby, much like yourself. So a first-time dad going through the trade deadline, both of you actually for the first time as new dads this year. But for him especially, what he's been able to do, the decisions he's had to make regarding Kane and starting the rebuild, which really began last season. I thought it was really interesting. The Athletic put out a great article about his help and involvement with the general manager for the Bears, Ryan Poles, and he wanted to kind of tap into Kyle Davidson's brain, who, from what I understand, talking to other people who work with him on a daily basis, he's brilliant. He's a really smart guy. He's been within the Hawks organizations for over 12 years now, so he understands the Blackhawks better than anybody. And Colby, what are your thoughts just on GMs from different leagues, professional sports, kind of getting information and getting a different perspective and how that might influence, for the Bears in their instance, what they were doing at the trade deadline as well? Yeah,
well, I think that, they're both in similar situations where they're both sort of in this rebuild mode and trying to rebuild from the draft and development, and they're not looking to go out and sign 20 free agents and put Band-Aids on big gaping holes. And so you kind of look at some of the things Kyle's done, whether it was trading Kirby, trading DeBrincat, and we're kind of a full season out from some of that. And to me, like, you look at the year Alex DeBrincat had, he's got 25, 26 goals, and then you start to think about that $9 or $10 million qualifying offer, and I'm like, geez, maybe Kyle really did know what he was doing there, and maybe he got the max value for him at that point. Think about trying to trade DeBrincat at the trade deadline with a $9 million qualifying offer. They wouldn't have even been able to get a first-round pick. They wouldn't have been able to. So he's made good moves, and we're a year out from these moves, and we're starting to see them come to fruition. And to me, he caught the eye of Ryan Poles the GM for the Bears. And, reading that article, Ryan Poles reached out to Kyle, wanted to pick his brain to see how they value draft picks versus players versus prospects versus futures. And I thought that was awesome. And I really did, because we're all armchair GMs. We sit around, we talk about the moves we would have made, we wouldn't have made. You and I get to do Shark Tank at the studio where we come up with new rules or trades or whatever. And it's all hypothetical, but very few people will ever occupy the job as a general manager of a major pro sports team, right? There's 30 teams on all the leagues, give or take. 4 sports here. There's big sports obviously in Europe, but we're just talking North America. So, we're talking about 100 people out of how many people that live in the United States? A few 100 million people. So I think that it's cool to see these general managers coming together to learn from one another, to pick each other's brain. I think that's only going to help Kyle. It's only going to help Ryan Poles. You want to hear how they're looking at things. And again, because you and I can sit here and give our opinion on everything, and we might be right sometimes, we might be wrong sometimes, but you and I have never sat in that chair. We just haven't. Even Hall of Fame hockey players have never sat in that chair and been a general manager. And so I'm all for it. I love it. I think those guys, bouncing things off one another is really awesome. I wouldn't be shocked if there was some back and forth between the Hawks and the Cubs based on Jeff Greenberg coming, into the front office. So, I don't know where you sit on that, Kaylee. I don't know how strongly you feel or if you think, those are good ideas, but knowing Kyle to be collaborative, I like it, and I think it's only going to strengthen the Blackhawks' opportunities to kind of learn and get ahead of the competition in some of these other markets.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it takes a lot of great minds now to be able to do what the Blackhawks have done successfully already in a year and a half into the rebuild. Like you mentioned, the DeBrincat trade and bringing in Jeff Greenberg, who has a lot of different perspective. They have great analytics with kind of a new team of people, new developments, new technology. It's really brand new, so they're still getting used to it, but it's changing the game. I'm eager to see what's going to happen in a few years from now, but it seems like Kyle and the staff are ahead of it. They're on top of it. They're trying to be innovative, and they're a very confident group too. I really like the way Kyle Davidson handles his business, the way he goes about making extremely difficult decisions, and the way he articulates that to both the fans, the players, management. I think he's done a really nice job and is really well respected for that, and it definitely helps to be able to bring in perspective. I'm all about it. I think it's been fun getting to learn kind of the direction that both the NHL wants to go and now the Blackhawks want to go with all this new age technology. And like you said, Hall of Famers can sit in that seat, and it's going to be a lot different perspective with their experience, how they value players, who they're looking at, than somebody like Kyle Davidson. And there's different teams of analytics brought in for someone like a Hall of Famer versus somebody like Kyle Davidson, who has a different background and different needs. So I think it's really exciting, and I'm excited to see hopefully all these major sports teams in Chicago come together and start getting really hot at the same time, the way Tampa Bay did while I was there, because it just puts the city on fire. And I think we all need a little bit more of that. So I loved that. And I'm looking forward to seeing more Cubs, Bears, and Hawks all together. Great stuff from that article with Kyle Davidson. Quick transition, not a good one. This is where we need Vosters, but let's look into NHL awards. Just a quick kind of Hart Trophy, Norris Trophy discussion. Colby, former defenseman, Erik Karlsson, back on the map. Pretty insane year for him statistically, numbers, what he's been able to do with the San Jose Sharks. Kind of an interesting year. He's obviously kind of the front runner for the Norris. There's not really anybody else that's putting together a season that competes with his numbers, but I've also not really seen a defenseman that low in the standings win a Norris Trophy either. So it's just kind of a weird year for it.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of competition for him, but how do you see Erik Karlsson wearing the Norris and winning it, and like who's close?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's his award this season, but I'll just say this. I think we need to kind of revisit the Norris Trophy situation, and I think we need to create a best offensive and best defensive defenseman because for years I've kind of, like you kind of look at a guy like Erik Karlsson who's got all those points, but you're right. He's on the ice for a ton of goals against, and we're talking about a defenseman. Now, I mean, it's incredible what he's done offensively this year. And you know what? He's been a lot better defensively. So I want to call a spade with that. He really has. And I know his coach out there. I played for him for about 5 or 6 years, and I've asked him about that. And he said, like, he's way more committed to defense this year than he's been the last couple of seasons. So I think he wins the award, Kaylee. But I'd love to see them split that off. And I'll give you a prime reason why. You were in Tampa Bay for the run. And I've been beating this drum for years that like Ryan McDonagh to me is probably the most underappreciated player in the whole NHL. Like I know how good Victor Hedman is, and you know how good Victor Hedman is, but I just think Ryan McDonagh, that style that he plays is so valuable. Like I don't think they win without him. I really don't. I think he's so important. The minutes he eats, the defensive plays he makes, the simple puck moving that he does. And I'd love to see a guy like him win a trophy for being the best defensive defenseman, even though he is more than that. And there's other examples. Ryan McDonagh is just one of my favorite players to watch. He's also an awesome guy that I'm, always rooting for. Got to play with him when we were a little bit younger at the national team and against him in college and all this and that. So, I'd love to see the NHL go to that. So this way we can recognize Erik Karlsson and Ryan McDonagh for having, great seasons. And I know Mac's season has not been as good this year in Nashville. He's dealt with a ton of injuries, but there are other worthy defensive defensemen out there that I think would be worthy of that. So I'm not sure how you would feel. I mean, I'm guessing your dad probably won a couple Norris trophies, right? I don't know for sure, but I would just assume based on his career. And I'd be curious, to get your perspective on it. Because like defensemen can be different and still effective.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, but I'm with you. Like watching Ryan McDonagh, I remember the GM for Tampa Bay watched a game that he played against Colorado and the way he defended 2-on-1s and his performance. He had said it was one of the best, if not like the best performances by a defenseman he had ever seen in his life, which was pretty like
coming from Julian. That's amazing.
Yeah, he was like unbelievable in that. But you're right. It's an interesting thing where I do feel like it'd be nice to just have one, but it's such a hard trophy to win when you've got it. It really depends on your team and style of play. I mean, there's so many different factors that go into it as a defenseman as compared to some of the other trophies that forwards typically are going to win or a goaltender.
Right.
It's just not as black and white for defensemen, but I'm with you. I think it'd be nice to just have one. I like the idea of having one, but it does kind of,
I mean, the forwards kind of have two because they've got the Selke and then they've got the, the heart. I mean, so.
Yeah, it's a good debate. I mean, I think at this point, you're right, though. There are a lot of defensemen that are worthy of being considered the best in that regard because you're supposed to be a great defenseman, not just an offensive defenseman. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. We're figuring out some other way to be able to reward another player for their defensive ability more so than their production, especially in a year like this where it's kind of strange that the Sharks are nearing the bottom with the Hawks and Columbus, and you get a Norris Trophy winner out of there. So it's like I don't know. It's a little weird. It's a different year. It's not usually like this. There's usually maybe a little bit more.
Because the years. Well, in the years that like Chara won or Doughty won or Hedman won, I mean, you could make an argument that they were not only the best offensively, but they were the best defensively as well. I mean, those three guys. So I feel like now I'm arguing against my own original argument, and I'm more siding with your.
On this every time, so I don't have a total answer for you because I like some of the years I'm like I think it's fine with one, and some years you're like this year it's like it's incredible what Karlsson's doing, and not many have been able to do that, especially in recent years. But then where do we look at it from the defensive side in the standings? It's kind of an odd year where there's no one that's contending because of the production total from that defenseman. So. We'll find out. I think it's going to be Karlsson's too. Should be an exciting in awards. Let's jump to Hart. So the Hart Trophy.
This
blatant.
This guy.
I think it's unanimous.
Yes.
McJesus.
Yes.
Trumps all. Okay, is there another player, an unsung hero? You mentioned him before, and you like the Dallas Stars a lot. I really like Robertson and what he's been able to do, building off a rookie season and potentially, earning a Hart Trophy nomination from me, at least, for what he's done for the Stars in that top line. But is there anybody else for you, Colby, that you would consider to be a Hart or contending there with McDavid?
Well, I do love the Robertson thing because he just picked off one of Mike Modano's milestones, and when you start picking off Mikey Modano, who is in the breath for the best all-time American players, I don't think he is anymore because I think Patrick Kane is. To me, I don't actually think it's that close. I think Kaner is here, and then there's a couple of guys, the Modano and Housley and Chelios and Roenick are like the next 3 or 4 guys, right? But I think Robertson's is a good one. Just kind of thinking about, teams sort of at the top. I think Braden Point, I mean, he's near, I think he just scored his 40th goal of the year. I love the way that guy plays. I think if he was playing last year, I think Tampa probably gets another cup last year. I really do.
I agree with you.
I think, I'm not sure there's a player more valuable to a great team than him. Which again, it's hard to, there's a lot of studs on that team, but I think he's had a great year. I think McKinnon in the last couple of months, the way he's come back and pushed Colorado up the standings. But at the end of the day, it's all kind of hyperbole, right? Because McDavid is just a whole nother level of something we've just never really been able to see, at least in our generation of like watching hockey.
Yeah, I agree. I hope to see him make a push in the playoffs and go pretty far because it's something we haven't seen enough of in recent years. And it's going to be a great playoffs, I think, this season. You mentioned Braden Point, matchup with Toronto, Tampa again. That's going to be big time. And just a lot of players. McKinnon, like you said, in the last month, his highlight reel goals and plays that he's been doing, it's just exciting. So there's a lot of great hockey players. McDavid obviously is most likely going to win the Hart this year, but a lot of really strong candidates. It's hard. You feel bad for the other guys that probably are deserving of it, but are just
100+ points. Pasternak just scored his like 51st and 52nd goal, and like he'll get maybe one vote. I mean, like it's going to be probably pretty close to unanimous. I mean, it really is, and it. If he stays healthy, he could win 7 or 8 of these things in a row. Like he's such a freak. He's so good.
I know. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be exciting. Well, very deserving. McDavid is a best player in the world. He's incredible. So he's going to run away with it at the awards for sure this year. And without further ado, let's transition to our interview for this week. She's done a tremendous job, was a former beat reporter for the Carolina Hurricanes, has a wealth of knowledge about hockey, culture, everything. And she was a lot of fun to sit down with this week and interview. Gave us a lot of great interesting information, social media, players, fashion, everything. So without further ado, let's welcome Sarah Siv.
All right, we are thrilled to welcome in a very special guest to the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. You know her as Sarah Siv. She's a reporter for Bleacher Report, Open Ice, and host of the podcast Too Many Men. Previously, she was a beat writer for The Athletic covering the Carolina Hurricanes. She has a tremendous social media following, over 79,000 followers on Twitter alone. Sarah, welcome to the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Are you in Boston right now, or are you on the road, or where are you at this moment?
Oh, yeah, I'm at my childhood home in Boston, in the Boston suburbs. It's been awesome. I thought I would hate living in my parents' basement again, but it actually has been so nice to catch back up with them because I was in Raleigh for 4 years, so it's been lovely.
How are those home-cooked meals?
Yeah, exactly. She just made steak, and she slays it as always, so who am I to complain, literally?
I used to complain like I wanted to leave so bad, and now I would do anything to go back to my parents' house and kick it for a bit. That's really great for you, going back home to family, too. I'm sure it's been really nice having that kind of support.
Yeah, and being around the Bruins this year has not hurt.
Yeah, so true.
Now, really important question, but how has your cat handled this, big life adjustment?
Yeah, she's over there. I'm waiting for her to enter the broadcast at any moment because she does not care what I say. But she has loved it because now there's multiple floors to live on, multiple places to jump, and things to drop. So she loves it.
Well, your cat is welcome on the Blackhawks Insider podcast at any moment if she so chooses. But it's great to have you on, really. Sarah, I have not met you in person yet, but I've actually been following you on Twitter and social media platforms for a long time, well before I was even in the running for the Blackhawks job, when I was really only tangentially involved in hockey. I was doing college hockey for the Big Ten Network. I think I somehow came across your stuff as a Penn State grad. Proud Nittany Lion. There we go. At some point in that process, I remember discovering you on social media, and it's really been fun to follow your career, especially as I've gotten more involved in hockey. You know, you do a great job promoting the sport, but then also your own personal brand in a witty and humorous way. And so it's really cool to be able to do this. And I would just love to dive into a little bit of your backstory, like how you really launched your career into this space. Can you give us as detailed of a version as you'd care to share?
Well, you know how it is in the Big Ten, right? There's so many good opportunities for students. So I kind of took one of those at Onward State, which is a student-run blog, learned the ropes there. And Penn State hockey went from club to D1 while I was there. So I guess I was just so fat. I'm really giving you like the whole thing, I guess. But
let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah,
let's go.
Yeah. The Nittany Lion gritty. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good one.
I was fascinated with the behind the scenes stuff about how Terry Pegula gave them all this money to build this, what's it called? Oh my God, why can't I think about this right now?
Pegula
Ice Arena.
Yeah.
That would be what it's called. And how that all works.
What should we
and
name
donors.
this?
Yeah. But yeah, that worked out, and I just loved talking to the coach about stuff, and it was so much more than just kind of the on ice stuff that I thought reporting on a team would be, and I kind of fell in love with telling stories of the guys and stuff like that and the story of the team. So from there, I just realized you could do that as a career, I guess. I don't know. I've always loved hockey and I love to write, and I was like, oh, I guess I didn't have like a big Twitter following at the time, but it was growing. And I think John Buccigross reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm really enjoying your work, because he's a college hockey guy. Like, keep it up and stay. I think that was the first time I was like, whoa, okay, maybe I will. And I dropped out of Penn State and covered the Penguins for a little bit, and then kind of wanted to go home, did more college hockey stuff, started working for EEI in Boston. Then I got a call from Craig Custance one day, who was the editor-in-chief at The Athletic. He was like, I think we have a good opportunity for a new young voice, but you're going to have to move to Carolina. I had never been there. I was like, they were like, I think Tom Dundon, the owner, called me and was like, I know we've been pretty bad for the past decade, but this year, Rod Brindamore, I'm telling you, he is going to change this franchise, and Tom Waddell is going to change this franchise. And they made the playoffs every single year since. And it was awesome being along for that ride. I get emotional. I miss it so much, and I wish the best for them. But it just got to a point during the pandemic where I miss my mommy. Like, I miss my family. I wanted to see, it was like kind of now or never, right? Where there were a few options I talked about with The Athletic, but none of them are Boston. And it just got to a point where I want to try to make it here. So I got in contact with BR Open Ice, and I absolutely love what they're about, just trying to make hockey fun and trying to make it look cooler. I don't know. It's with the TNT broadcast too. So it's been really cool to see how both of those entities work together and how we're really trying to just make this enjoyable for a new audience.
Well, there were lots of moments in your retelling there that resonated with me in my journey as well. You know, you have some kind of notion about where you want to end up career-wise or where you want your career to go, but ultimately it just comes down to plugging and chugging, putting one foot in front of the other, and then you sort of see where the opportunities take you. And I will also second the fact that I missed my mom too during the pandemic, and I spent a ton of time at home as well. Just, I don't know, getting some kind of rest and relaxation, I suppose. But and my dad too. Shout out to the old man there. But you mentioned getting an endorsement from John Buccigross, and that was a real confidence boost for you. But At what point did you really feel like, you were kind of, especially in a social media sphere, getting traction, racking up followers, and really kind of starting to make an impact in that space?
I think it was definitely when I took the job in Carolina. I think I had not to brag about myself, but it was just interesting because it's not really about me, but I had the most fastest growing Twitter account in the Athletic history, just because people were really interested in the Hurricanes team. And there were a few local reporters, but there had never really been kind of like a national voice there. Not that I was a national, but the Athletic was a national thing that people were really excited about. So I think that, and like me telling jokes on Twitter and kind of, for better or for worse, bearing it all on Twitter. Like, I think maybe people were just interested in that, but it's wild to look back and see how that all happened. Like, it doesn't even make sense to this day, but hey, if you want to read my tweets, feel free.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how you used and leveraged like social media to promote yourself and your brand. And Emily Kaplan came on, and I really appreciated what she said about being authentically yourself and how that relates to people. And it's hard to make it without being that. But I like that you kind of carved your own path and kind of created your own journey. It's not really conventional working in sports or broadcast or, like I remember when I went to school, I was like, okay, like, you have to be sideline and that's going to be it. And everyone wanted to do NFL and stuff. So for you, like what parts of things did you like in your journey, and what things kind of maybe pushed you away that allowed you and maybe motivated you to kind of create your own sort of brand?
That's a great question. You mentioned Emily Kaplan. We've talked a lot about social media and how she tries to stay off it sometimes, and I'm like always on it trying to stay off it too. It's so interesting. And then she didn't ever plan on being a sideline reporter or anything like that. And here she is. So all these paths that can lead you somewhere. I think the number one thing for me has been knowing or realizing that I don't have to pigeonhole myself, right? It's like when I started working for Le Batard too, now our podcast is with Meadowlark, they're like, why don't you talk about things that aren't just hockey? Why don't you try? I'm like, I don't really know. They're like, none of us do. We just are talking like we're friends, we have opinions, whatever it is. I think
like people.
Yeah, like people that are
entertained.
Like I think realizing you can be more, you don't have to be, you can have like a niche, a niche or whatever. It could be stats, but I'm never going to be this like stat expert, and I don't want to be, and I don't have to be. And I don't think I'm going to be a sideline person either. But I think I've always tried to figure out what it is about my Twitter, right, that makes people like randomly follow me the way that they do. And I know they don't have to. And I'm like, how do I make that into a career? And that is pretty unconventional, right? Like I think I'm realizing I could try a little bit more entertainment side of stuff, and Le Batard has definitely helped so much in that. The way their show is, they had me on during the All-Star game, and it was just, it was like you're watching a movie and it's right there. So I think just realizing you can try more things than like you were told that you could,
And I would echo a lot of that too from my own personal experience. Getting the Blackhawks job has given me this platform and this pedestal that I haven't had before, and so I'm grappling with a lot of those same questions I think that you had, Sarah, and maybe are continuing to have as your career evolves, just about finding your voice. And do you have any advice for me, or
wow,
anybody
my
like
ego
big
is
picture?
stroked.
Like about kind of like creating your niche on social media like that?
I would just say not everybody has to be like, I think sometimes I try to emulate other people a little too much, and I'm like, okay, no, let me get back to like, it feels kind of whatever you have that one thing that like people know you for, whatever, you can play into that, but you can also try new things. I think about this every day. Like you said, I still have questions about that, but I think connecting with people is probably the number one tool that I've used on Twitter that has really helped. Like I follow a lot of people back, and I like to like have inside jokes with people. I don't know if that's like too parasocially and it gets a little exhausting, but I do think I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for like the people that follow me and support my work. So I think that's kind of how I've made it all work. But everybody has a different thing, and it's okay to kind of stray away from things, and it'll always like your thing will always be there if you need to go back to it. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, it 100% did. And I like the point, like how you said that, social, we all know that social media can be toxic. And I would like to get into that at some point later in this conversation. But also, I think you have realized and you still understand that at the core, social media is about connecting with other people. And that can be very rewarding as well. And I think I really like what you said about that. So that was, I'm tracking 100%.
Thanks so much.
Can you give an example of like a post that you maybe like that surprised you, that did really well, or something personally that you posted that you really are proud of or that you liked?
There's
a million
personal
tweets.
Yeah, the personal stories or whatever kind of get to me sometimes. Like I think, motorcycle just went off, so my cat pooped out. But I think probably my favorite was a few years ago when the Canes had the bunch of jerks thing, and Brian Burke had made all these comments, and I was like, Brian Burke's from my hometown, and I know him and his family, so I just was kind of like, the Canes fans were all over Twitter just kind of crapping on him in a way that didn't sit right with me. Like, it was a little too much, and they could have been doing that to Don Cherry instead of Brian Burke. They picked Brian Burke, and I said, guys, listen, there is a foundation. Here's Ring.
There she is.
Right in the middle.
There's a foundation that he founded You Can Play for his late son, Brendan, who is openly gay, and we lost him tragically in a car accident. But he and his son, Patrick, who's in the Department of Player Safety, founded that. And I was just like, guys, I know I love Canes Twitter and what you guys stand for, so wouldn't it be fun if we donated all this money to his foundation, and then he acknowledged that he likes the bunch of jerks. So they donated like thousands of dollars, and Brian wore a bunch of jerks shirt. And I just loved that, like, part of connection where you realize as much bad as there is on social media, you do have the power to use it for good sometimes.
Well, and I would like to just ask you about the bull crap too, because again, I admire how you, in some ways, fight fire with fire when it comes to that. I mean, my approach to social media has been to put my head in the sand as much as I can, and filter my mentions really, really severely, and just try and tune out all of that outside noise, the negativity, even if that comes at the expense of a lot of positive too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to take the opposite approach, and you don't seem to back down from banter on Twitter. So can you take me through your philosophy on that side of the game?
Yeah, there's a few parts to this. I think if I could not be addicted to Twitter, I'd probably be able to block out the negativity better. But unfortunately, like, no matter what I try, I always go back to like scrolling through Twitter. So I work on that. I've talked to a therapist for a few years who has really helped. And I talked to Emily Kaplan about this. And my therapist gave us both advice that was, don't let their perception of you become your perception of you. And when you think about it, I can like enter the arena of these idiots, because it's like, they don't actually know me as a human. I know me, and it's kind of strengthened who I think I am as a person. Like, I know I'm not a bad person. So if someone's saying something about that or my looks or whatever, they're just trying to hurt me. They don't know me. But there's that. And then I think about, what if I was myself 10 years ago looking at all this? I'd want somebody older in this position to stand up for themselves, or maybe be like, okay, I'm not going anywhere, and I can say what I want. I don't really know how to explain that, but I feel like for younger girls watching, I don't know if I'm like a great role model, just because I'm sometimes a little bit graphic, but I do think they should know they don't have to sit down and shut up, even though they're allowed to, but like, you can have the option to speak up.
That's interesting.
Well, you both have thicker skin than I do. That's all I'll say.
We have to. As women, we have to.
The stuff that I see people say, I mean, it's crazy. So I admire that. I really do.
Thank you.
Is there, like, do you have kind of rules like when to engage or like certain things not to entertain and engage? Because I've found that I feel like it's a very small percentage of people that kind of ruin social media for you, and it makes it seem like it's this mass amount of people that feel this certain way when something goes off. And I'm not as active as I should be on Twitter. Sometimes it's overwhelming thinking about having to create content all the time. I'm scared to put myself out there. But for you, when do you engage somebody that's, negative or not? Because I know you are really active and you do like to interact. And like you said, you sometimes you need to stand up for yourself. So how do you pick your spots? And is there any Twitter beef that you're pretty proud of yourself for?
That's a great question. Sometimes it's risky and it doesn't always pay off. It usually does not pay off to respond to these things. But I love, like, if I'm being honest, sometimes I'm like, why did I say? The second it goes off, but my new thing lately has been, okay, I want to put this up for 3 minutes and then delete the tweet because it gives you the same satisfaction, I guess. But I don't know. Sometimes I try things and they don't stick. But I like when I have something funny I can respond to. Like if I have a good insult coming back, then I'm like, okay, this will make people laugh or whatever. But sometimes you're just having a bad day and you see the wrong thing. But it is so true that it's like, it doesn't matter how many people say nice things to you. You're going to focus on the bad ones some days. But I like to now have boundaries, or at least try, where it's like, okay, did I sleep enough? Did I drink enough water? Oh, I can log on. I've been trying to use Instagram more too, because you can filter things so much better through it, that I'm just like trying to pivot to that. But at the same time, Twitter is always going to be, I like to post. I do like to interact with people. It is a tough, like to this day, I haven't figured it out. So if you guys have any tips for me, please let me know.
Well, do you have any kind of output goal in mind on a per day, per week basis? I know for me, I've been trying this season to put out something on one of my social channels every day, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. Those are kind of my big three. Really working on my TikTok game, but sometimes when I'm in a rush, you can give me a follow.
I love you. I love Chris's TikToks.
Absolutely. I love that you do TikTok. I consume hours of TikTok, but I feel like when I post, I'm like, hey kids, how are you doing? But I like that. I think I'm done with my Twitter social media goals. You know what I mean? Like I never would be like, I want to hit 100K or something like that. But on Instagram and TikTok, like you said, it's a different story. And also with our Too Many Men podcast Twitter account, I'm really passionate about, okay, let's post these 3 videos at this time and let's post X amount of tweets about, I really try to grow that brand and stuff. And that's probably how people use their personal work Twitters. But for me, it's like I pat myself on the back when I don't tweet for a day.
Okay.
Like, wow, she really shut up. Good for her.
That's great.
But I got to check out the TikTok. And you got to give me some TikTok tips, because I really feel like
Chris,
an old woman on that.
You know what? Like, honestly, I think the key is to just like throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. I'm amazed at some of the most like popular stuff on that app. There's, all the things you can do to create videos and like the special effects and features that you can use to dress up a video on TikTok. The stuff that goes viral is just like, point and shoot, like throw it up, like 10 seconds, something on a loop. So that's kind of made me feel like, okay, I'm not some dinosaur in this arena for, Gen Z or something like that. And so it's been fun, but, I guess I don't know if it's like swallowing my pride or just whatever kind of word or phrase you want to put on it. But I've been going down the rabbit hole. So it's been fun though. I encourage, I think you would be great too. I think that, you could just put funny stuff that showcases your humor like you do on other platforms. And just, they say that it's the app that rewards hard work the best, the way their algorithm is laid out, that if you just are consistent about your posts, you will build a following. And I found that as well. I mean, I'm only at like 2,000 or so followers on TikTok, but I'm rapidly approaching my Instagram following. And I mean, it's, I'm like putting in as much work on the 2 platforms. You reap what you sow, I think, a lot faster on TikTok than in Instagram. So Kaylee does a great job on Instagram, by the way. I'll just give her a shout out.
I try. Chris is a lot braver than me. I find that it's sometimes hard to put yourself out there, but Chris is very good at just going for it in certain ways that I am not. And I wonder for you, like, because you've tweeted so much and you have like thousands of tweets, like when you think about, especially from an entertainment perspective or trying to be funny or humorous, like, do you look back at things a few years ago and you're just like, why did I tweet that? Or do I delete? Like, part of that is also, I think of things like, oh, in 10 years or in 6 years, is that something that I'll think was like funny or not? Like, how do you kind of juggle that from an entertainment perspective? Because that's what our job is.
I do have an app called Semi-Feral where it automatically deletes tweets like every year or something, and you can tweet like anything that has less than like X amount of likes or something, or retweet. So I definitely like to keep it clean on that, like no digital footprint over here. But I think the only things I regret, like I don't really care if I told a stupid joke, but the things I regret are when I accidentally upset a player or something that I didn't mean to. And I've done that a few times, and that's something I really, really try. Like sometimes I'll on purpose say what I need to say if that's upsetting somebody. That's kind of their own problem, and we hash it out. But I think there was one player where I like sarcastically tweeted something that I meant he had like a really good game, and I was like, yeah, but he sucks, right? Because everybody was talking about how he sucks, and he liked it. And then on the plane, he was like, so I suck. I was like, oh, I did not mean that.
Oh, did you hash it out?
Oh, yeah. And that's kind of the good thing that's what I miss about showing up to the rink every day, too, is that you can explain yourself, right? And your relationships with players go stronger when you're like, listen, I'm just being an idiot on Twitter. Like, do not believe anything I say, but always feel free to come up and talk to me about it. But there's definitely been a few times where I'm getting in trouble, and I'm like, well, was it worth it for, like, a tweet? No.
Do you feel players are pretty receptive to you when you come in and say, look, that's just me, being a goof on Twitter? Like, do you think players understand that?
I think once we have conversations and they see I'm not the type of person that's kind of like, gotcha. I think a lot of players have been burned, or at least felt like they've been burned by hockey media before, just because of how serious it can be sometimes. But when they realize, oh, like she really is not serious, that I think we can all get along. But obviously, there's times where I have my job and they have their job, and it's not always gonna be in perfect harmony. But you gotta have to kind of just accept that sometimes. If you're me, that I'm not here to make sure that they all love me and that we're all best friends. It's like there's somewhat of a job to do.
Okay. Well, you were, talking about building your career as a writer, and now you're transitioning into more of the broadcast space as well, especially with your Too Many Men podcast. And just as a quick aside, huge fan of the Dan Le Batard show with Stu Gatz. Like, honestly, that was one of the shows. Like, I listened to. I used to work for an ESPN radio affiliate that put him on when he got Colin Cowherd's old time slot on ESPN radio from like 10 to 1 or something like that. But then even after I left the radio community and moved to Chicago, I still listened to that show on a regular basis. Me and my roommate at the time were huge fans, and especially during the pandemic too. I mean, it was like a bright spot in our day to listen to Le Batard. So super cool that you are part of the Meadowlark Network. And I saw you on the Dan Le Batard show during NHL All-Star Week, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a bucket list item for me to be on that show with those guys.
I was like, my head was spinning. If you watch the show, I'm like, okay. But he said the second before we get on, he goes, I'm not going to ask you any questions. Just jump in like you're on the show every day. I was like, okay, that's okay, sure. But they were all really helpful. I know Chris Whitty just said he's doing MLS stuff now and is taking a step back from executive producing, but he was excellent to me. And working with them, even tangentially, has been a dream. Dan has been so good to me. And it's one of those things where in the past, it's felt like with my social media and everything else. Like, people have tolerated that because they like the work that I do, like writing and reporting and stuff like that. And meanwhile, at Le Batard, they encourage me to do more of the social media stuff and be kind of more of a goofball and say more about what I believe in. Like, that's kind of, if you listen to the show, it's like part of the show to not even really talk about sports. So I have just appreciated that so much, and it's kind of given me like a powerful shift in my mind where I'm like, wait, people actually like this, and they're not just like tolerating the annoying little problem child of the company.
Well, I really like your podcast too. I did some listening before we got to interview you, and I think podcasts are so cool in sports, especially because now athletes, you know, who have this, like, have always had like a narrative about them, like they can bring it and tell their own story. Chris is a big Aaron Rodgers Packers fan. I think he's one of those people, like, as of late in the last couple of years, who has done just that and kind of shattered different stigmas by just being himself and bringing his own story. There's like Bussin' with the Boys. There's the Kelsey brothers in the NFL. Can you talk about, I mean, I haven't listened to all of them because I have 2 little kids, and I've told Chris this a million times, like I pop in audibles on dietary and sleep routines, not so much podcasts anymore, but
in between episodes of Paw Patrol.
Yeah, between my Coco Melon episodes, I squeeze it in. But I am curious, like, from an entertainment standpoint, they're great. Like, what do you hope that your podcast brings in the NHL? Like, how much do we kind of need, like, that type of entertainment, like podcast or something like that, maybe? Or what do you think that we can like benefit from to help like grow the sport the way that, you know, NBA or NFL have been able to do so successfully, utilizing some of their players? Your podcast is really interesting. It's all women. Can you just talk about a little bit about both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, obviously, like, you look at the popularity of something like Chiclets and you just want there to be like 10 more Chiclets, things like that. But it's like, it's one of the most popular media productions in hockey, period. And they're like so many followers on Instagram and Twitter and everything like that. And then they just let players be themselves. So if we can just do more of that, I love missing curfew and not being afraid. I don't know. I think a lot of times the better question is, how can we make sure players feel like they can be themselves without kind of jeopardizing the team aspect of hockey? You know how that is, like we before I think they feel sometimes. I think this is also why my little NHL style rankings have done well, and the players like contact me about it and they really care about it. It's because they don't have to talk about themselves, but they can still express themselves. And I want to be like, no, feel free to talk about yourself, but they don't want to get in trouble for maybe talking about themselves. You know how it is in hockey culture. So I think just more normalize it. I think Trevor Zegras, say what you will about him, I think he's great to have a personality like that. I think Jack Hughes is awesome too. And these younger kids, I think, are ushering in maybe a more fun. There's some on the Blackhawks too, now that there's like so many younger guys.
So I just real quick, I need to nominate someone, Lucas Reichel, for your style rankings. He's got this awesome blue checkered suit that
Right.
I think is a 10 out of 10. I think it's lights out. You know, for a guy, he's 20 years old. He's a rookie. I don't think it's too loud. I don't think he comes across as braggadocious or cocky or anything like that. But I mean, I think Kaylee's heard me, rave. It's almost like I got a man crush on the guy or something, but it's a nice suit. So keep an eye out for that. If you see it, Lucas Reichel, keep an eye out.
Toss me the pick after the show. I don't know if the Blackhawks, the problem with this too sometimes is some teams don't post these like pre-game photos as much, and other ones are constantly posting. So then I get like oversaturated with certain teams. But I understand, especially like the teams that aren't necessarily at the top of the list, or the top of the standings these days. It's like every time they try to post something about fashion, there's a million comments that are like, "Just win the game." It's like,
Who's your top-ranked, one of your top-ranked fashionistas? Nostas?
on the Blackhawks or in general?
In general, do you have a Blackhawks one?
I was going to say Max Dowie. He's not on the team anymore, so not him anymore. But that was a short-lived little stint.
We miss Max. He was a great guy.
He
Great
was,
to have
yeah,
around.
he was.
Personality. I mean, David Pastrnak, Patrick Laine. Laine isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I respect a disruptor, right? And sometimes I don't love his outfits, but I do respect them, if that makes sense. Just doing what he wants, and he has like a fun little prop. But Pastrnak probably has the best style. I think Ryan Reeves is really underrated. Keandre Miller. There's a few.
So the question that I hear asked a lot, it's kind of like maybe the unspoken question. Is hockey hip enough or cool enough or trendy enough? Do you think that's the right question to ask? When it comes to just keeping the game culturally relevant to young fans, or is there something else, like some other angle that needs to be taken, or are we overthinking it?
I think we might be overthinking it, and that's the uncoolest thing you could do, right? I think sometimes when you try too hard to be hip and not just be yourself, what is cool about hockey? Hockey is the best sport, hands down, in my opinion, because of the way that it's played and everything about the sport itself. So maybe let's make more of an emphasis on that. You can't force something to be something that it's not. So when we say it's not cool, first of all, I'd ask, what do we really mean by that, and how can we change it? I have thoughts on, I don't think there should be a salary cap, because I think we need more stars, and I think Connor McDavid should be winning a cup right now. I want to see him in the cup. I want to see, I don't know. I think for it to be popular in America, we kind of need a few more stars here. We need them to be marketed. I think we're trending in the right direction, though. I've seen Miller pack up a few sponsorships. I've seen Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews with their fashion sponsorships. I kind of like what Matthews is doing, but that's Toronto. It's always going to be popular there. I think we're trending in the right direction, but I do think forcing it is more of a problem than being uncool.
I did want to just loop back briefly to podcasts, and especially having you on, and as you get more involved in podcasting. If you have, we're trying to build up the Blackhawks Insider podcast as well. As you can see, this backdrop, I wish I could do it in front of these curtains every show. But all kidding aside, what have you learned about the podcasting world as far as what kind of clicks there?
I think you can't be afraid to say, have a actual honest conversation about stuff, or just there's that. And I think the way you market it is really important too. Like sometimes this morning, when the Fanatics partnership was announced with the NHL, I remembered we had a clip from one episode, and I was like, oh, let's post the clip with the video and stuff. And then it did numbers just because I just had remembered that. So I think keeping stock of like your social media posts and trying to keep track of which episodes do well, which don't. There's a lot of weird algorithm stuff, like we were talking about before too, where like you have to post X amount of days. I think just staying consistent with it really does help. And I don't know, sometimes I'm not saying keep having me on the podcast, but I think like having interesting, I'm not tuning in, but like interesting guests, or the timing of when something interesting happens with the Blackhawks, go record something quick. And it's a pain in the butt sometimes, but that's when you really do get those numbers.
Well, that is great advice. And I know that our producer, Trevor Bray, is taking note of that. Look,
Sorry if it doesn't work.
No, we tinkered with that a little bit around the trade deadline, especially with how active the Blackhawks were, of course, and we were able to get our general manager Kyle Davidson on, pretty much minutes after the trade deadline hit, and that was a great episode for us. We had a lot of downloads, so again, that immediacy can definitely be used to your advantage when you have that card to play, but. You're an open book, Sarah. There are so many topics going on in the game right now that we could talk to you about, but we really appreciate you coming on. We'll let you go, but let's keep this open-ended. We would absolutely love to have you on again and continue doing your thing in hockey. I would just say, as it coming into the sport, I didn't really grow up around the game like a lot of hockey fans do, but I have really, really just loved being a part of the hockey community, learning about the game, learning about the NHL in particular. So, I'm hoping for the continued growth and success of the game on and off the ice, and really looking forward to keeping in touch. So thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime you guys want me on, I'll come on. Thanks for all the kind words. You really pumped my tires.
Thank you, Sarah. You're great.
Of course. Thanks so much.
Well, that was a great interview with Sarah Siv. So much knowledge, experience. She's just incredible. Her brand and what she's been able to do relating to fans, players on social media, big Twitter following. That's kind of her bread and butter, as she talked about, and was really insightful with the kind of information she wants to relay to fans, and also just getting hockey players and the NHL and the sport kind of more at the forefront of pop culture and sports culture and all that kind of stuff. So she does a tremendous job being opinionated, having fun, and trying to bring players a little bit out of their shell, Colby, and kind of be more interactive on social media with the fans. That's what we all want.
Yeah, and it's actually a nice little segue because my favorite part of the show, always Sellies and Chirps. Normally you're bringing the heat, Kaylee, and you're usually getting me all going and all fired up with some good debate topic. You've kind of changed Sellies and Chirps to like, let's just see how many buttons I can press in this week's episode. But talking about, Sarah's social media following, Twitter, there's been a lot of Twitter talk lately in the news. I mean, Elon Musk bought the company. It's been kind of interesting to see people sort of melting down over it, which I just like, I've always been kind of unbothered by it because I'm just like, nothing has really changed. And the blue check debacle. I mean, it's been really funny to see how up in arms people have been. LeBron James tweets, "I'm not paying $5 for a blue check." And it's funny when like a guy who's worth like $1 billion doesn't want to shell out $5. I just like kind of laughed at that. The New York Times, they lost their blue check mark. Like, it's just funny to see all the stuff going on. And then at the end of it, I'm actually pulling it up on my phone right now because I'm going to read it. So now, if you were a legacy blue check mark on Twitter, which is what like you and I would be, right? Legacy blue checks versus the new subscription. Now, if you click it, it says this account is verified because it's subscribed to Twitter Blue or it's a legacy verified account. So they made it so you'll never know if it's a person of importance or if it's a verified account. Me personally, I like this whole thing, and I'll tell you why, because it forces people to put their real identity into their Twitter account, and I think people would be like more accountable for what they're saying on Twitter, because people say nasty stuff on Twitter. I mean, they really do. It's crazy things people say on Twitter. So I've enjoyed this whole blue check mark debacle. It's just been funny to see people getting all angry. So I'm going to celebrate it, Kaylee, but I'm just curious from your perspective, have you followed it? Are you chirping it? Do you think the paid subscription is ridiculous? Do you agree with the fact that they want to earn revenue? Like, where do you sit on this topic?
Well, as part of being verified, is that to ensure that it's a real person with their identity and not a bot? Is that what that is for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then in that sense, I did not follow this. As soon as I saw it, I was like, I don't care. I'm also not going to pay $5.
Yeah,
well,
I wouldn't have paid for it.
And I don't care. I guess out of principle. So I think it is funny LeBron James won't either. But yeah, it's weird. It makes more sense now that you say that it's just to eliminate people who are not verified as people on there, and at least gives them an identity that they have to be forthcoming with. So maybe that cleans up some of the small percentage of people that do a lot of damage and ruin it for the rest of us that want to enjoy what Twitter should be more of. So I'll celebrate it with you. I think it's funny. I did not read more into it. I just wasn't too paranoid about losing the check mark or not, or what that means to me. My Twitter game stinks. So
yeah, but your Instagram story game is very good though. So
thanks. I'm a big Instagram.
Where like my Instagram game is awful, and I feel way stronger about my ability to tweet. So we're like, we're yin and yang. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're giving them one thing, I'm giving them another thing. But at the end of the day, just funny. People just shouldn't get so up in arms. Like, let's just wait and see what happens. That's what I would say, because at the end of the day, nobody lost their blue check. Now you can't tell who has a blue check and who didn't, who's paying and who's not, equity for all. And, just take a deep breath sometimes and just wait for it to happen before you get all upset. That's all. Funny for me.
The internet does not take a deep breath,
no.
but that's wishful thinking.
All right,
I'll
Kaylee, what do you got for us? Are you going to stir me up today or no?
I like the button. No, I usually like the buttons more when it's the three of us because it brings three different angles maybe that'll get it going. But last week when I was talking to Chris, it did make me think because I usually get going on Halloween ideas because I like to handcraft them long time in advance. So I will ask, do you celebrate? And you have a baby now, so you do have to put more thought and effort into A, the Halloween costume, B, the creative side of it, and how much time you're going to have to do it all. So do you celebrate or chirp having your Halloween costume picked out by late spring, let's say May, early June?
I think that I would celebrate it. And I've never really done that before. I've always been like a last second, when I was in college, oh my God, we need a costume. We're going out tonight, whatever. I was never well in advance, but I was always jealous of the people that crushed Halloween. And my wife crushes Halloween every year. She made me dress up as Willy Wonka a couple years ago, and she was Violet and did the blue face paint. And people were like, the costumes look legit. I mean, she sourced this costume from Amazon, the jacket. I mean, it looked like it matched up to the picture. I was like, and she did it for very little money, which I was very impressed about. I mean, she was on Alibaba ordering things from China. I was like, wow. So my wife has gone above and beyond. One year she was the mother of dragons. Her whole head was blonde. Alex has a big dark head of hair. So it was so she goes all in. I've always thought it's kind of cool. Now that I have a daughter, can't wait to go trick-or-treating, can't wait to dress her up as a cute little lion or a golden retriever or something like that. But now I'm going to be leaning on you, Kaylee, because I know you've already made all these costumes that probably don't fit Bella anymore. So I'm going to be leaning on you a little bit. But I'm celebrating with you on this. I think that balling out on Halloween is cool, even though it's never been my thing. I've always been a little jealous of it.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Do you know what little Sloan is going to be? Being a puppy for your first is always kind of an iconic, traditional rite of pass. So I feel like for you, that's right up your alley.
Yeah, well, we'll dress her up to look like Oliver. The Stroms did that, maybe, and it was the cutest thing I've ever seen with their daughter. They dressed her up like they're golden, and I had tears streaming down my cheeks when I was looking at this photo. It was just the cutest thing I've ever seen. So hopefully we can step up to the plate this year.
Yes, well, make sure you get lots of pictures. That's probably one of my only regrets when I handcrafted all of my college get-ups. It wasn't social media-esque then, so we just never took any pictures. We literally had Polaroids, so we would avoid anything going anywhere.
What about the Chelios clan? What's the plan this year? I mean, you've got a clan, and I hope you're roping your dad. I hope you're roping your dad into this stuff, especially after the thing we saw the other day with him doing this with the hands. I mean, we were dying laughing watching that whole thing.
Good April Fool's joke. Yeah, we don't have ours for next year quite picked out yet. Danny was on a hunting trip, my husband, last year, so we missed Fred Flintstone. It was kind of an essential part of the Flintstone gang.
Basically Fred Flintstone too.
A little bit, yeah, a little more handy, but
he just goes outside and just builds things with his hands. The guy's a legend.
I know. So I'm going to implore him to build something for our wagon with the kids this year. I don't know what it's going to be. We did Scooby-Doo Gang a couple years ago. It was a hit. I think I was manifesting the red hair, so we'll see. This year we still got to get something going. But lots of pictures, lots of time to decide what we're going to do. And I'm excited to hear what Vosters is thinking about doing next year as well. So that's going to just about do it for us on this week's episode on the podcast. So thank you very much to our great partners, Chevy, and for all of our listeners, anybody who's joining in, there's going to be plenty more content available on Blackhawks.com. Would love to give a shout out and a lot of credit to Brad Dollar and Southside Jake for the music featured on the podcast. And once again, thank you to our partners with Chevy. Drive with the Captain Jonathan Toews drives. That's going to do it for Blackhawks Insider. For Colby Cohen, I'm Kaylee Chelios. Be sure to tune in and watch all of our videos on Blackhawks.com.